Welcome to Not Your Typical Church Ladies, faith conversations for your real life. I'm Vicky, and each week I'm joined with my fellow workers in the vineyard, Anne and Karen, to break open the Sunday scriptures and talk about life and faith and everything in between. Join your Not Typical Church Ladies on this journey each week.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Lent, week 3. We are still in year B, dealing with these lovely readings from Mark and John. And we got another good set today, you guys. Let's see. To give you an overview, we've got the 10 Commandments are given in the first reading. So that one's not too rough. 10 Commandments. We've got St. Paul in Corinthians talking to us about how we proclaim Christ crucified and how that is a difficult teaching. And then we have Jesus in the temple with a whip, flipping tables and driving the money changers out. Who wants to start? Got this today.
Okay, I don't know if this will make it in or whatnot, but in my head, I was holding my pencil and we were drinking our teas and coffees, and it just reminded me of like the NFL guys when they comment on the football games. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is, and then we're talking about Jesus flipping tables and,
You want to do a play-by-play of Jesus?
I almost feel like it's a play-by-play. Exactly. I'm just going to jump to the gospel because I'm going to do it. Okay, as a church lady working for the church for almost 20 years, and I can confidently say that this has been shared among the staff and as well, is how many times I think of this story when we have something going on at the church that we're asking for money, and there's posters and everything and all this stuff in our gathering spaces.
Good things. We're not saying they're bad things.
No, I didn't say that they're bad things. I didn't say, but it was just funny. It just reminds me of sometimes I walk in and I'm like, oh, what would Jesus do? And I was like, oh, Jesus would probably flip all the tables. But I love this gospel because it shows Jesus's humanity.
Right.
In all the other stories, this is one of the only stories we hear Jesus getting angry and actually acting on his anger. How human is that? I mean, I walk into my house and I see that the kids haven't done anything that I asked them to do, and I just go, rah! And that's all I can picture Jesus. And I'm like, okay, Jesus wasn't always in prayer or calm, cool, collected. He was human. He had those emotions of come on, people, let's get with it. And I love that idea. Now, granted, I think he needed to do it because people always thought he was calm, cool, and collected and didn't take him seriously. It's like those family memes, no one listens to me until I go into anger mode. And the idea that church should not be for all of that other stuff, but it's a holy, sacred place for worship and the celebration of our Eucharist. And there is a time for everything. So I'm not saying that, outreach is not good. But I think sometimes what is our mission? What are we putting in ourselves? What is becoming materialistic for ourselves that we push the holy and the sacred away? Not even a physical church, but us as a temple. What are we manifesting and things that are considered priorities over our holiness and our temple within ourselves and in our faith journey? So I'm going to just end it there because that was a whole lot of stuff.
Well, and what made Jesus angry? like, yeah, my father's house should be a house of prayer, one, but also because of what those money changers were doing. Like they were selling the animals to the people who had to buy them to sacrifice them at the temple, right? So it was like a rigged system where like it was creating obstacles between people and God. It was creating obstacles, and they were making money out of other people's, need to express their faith. And so, we talked about it was actually like a justice issue, right? So, like, what are some of the things that make you angry that you think make God angry, right? I get angry when I feel like people are placing obstacles between people and God. That's something that drives me nuts. Um, yeah. So for me, it's like, I don't want to say Jesus's anger is encouraging, but I feel like I can relate to it because there's a lot of things that happen in churches that make me angry. I'm not going to give a list here in public.
Why not? I shared. No. Yeah, we may have to edit that part out.
But no, yours was very fun. But I don't want to get political about things. But like, yeah, there's a lot of things that happen in churches that make me angry because they keep people out.
Right. Yeah.
Instead of bringing people in. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah.
Well, and I think too, the second part of that reading, right, when we go into, destroy the temple and I will build it back in 3 days, that reminder of what the new covenant that was to happen. And, his frustration, I think, is this place of, I'm trying to teach you this, what my father truly wants, and you're not getting it. And like, why aren't you getting it? And like you said, I think any mother, anyone who's ever gone into a home and had asked for things to be done and weren't done, or people were not understanding, can understand that frustration of being like, I have said this how many times, how many times do I need to say this? And also, one of the things that I thought too was, well, he's so understanding to the disciples when they make mistakes and they don't understand. And because they're trying so hard. And I think in this case, he was just frustrated with the lack of even trying almost. It's like, it's blatant. You're doing it in the open. You're doing it in my father's house. How, like, can we move forward? But yeah, I do like the idea that Jesus got mad too, because sometimes.
Well, and I think we don't always honor how radical a figure he really was and like what a threat he was to the establishment at that time, right? I mean,
Yeah.
this story it's in Lent for a reason, even though it's from the beginning of John's gospel. And that's because it's something that leads directly to the cross. This action is one of those red flags that he waved in front of, the religious leaders, and they came after him. And yeah, I mean, in this week's reading, he talks about, if you tear down the temple and I will rebuild it in 3 days, he's foreshadowing his own death and resurrection. But we see him in another gospel later on in Lent weeping over the destruction of this temple, because this actual physical temple is going to be destroyed.
Yeah.
A few years on from when Jesus is talking, a generation beyond when Jesus is talking. And we know it's like the central mystery of our faith that like things die and things are reborn, and we deal with this in a personal way every time we suffer a loss personally. But I think in this gospel, Jesus is getting at like the death of structures and the death of systems and like the death of the way that things have been, and like just procedures where some people have and some people have not, and we're all just kind of stuck in this machine. But he's not for that. Like he wants people to have the support they need to find God. That's what Jesus wants. So I think this gospel is challenging, especially for people like us who actually, even though we're talking about what bugs us about church, like we love the church. We work in the structure of the church, right? So we're in a time of great change and it can feel like things are crumbling. And I think the challenge for a lot of us is just to realize that there's a rebuilding that's going to be happening. Yeah.
And it's, I had mentioned about our bodies as a temple, but, taking it from this is a perfect reading for Lent, because what do we need to cleanse ourselves from? What temptations do we want to move away from, or what practices do we want to encourage and invite more into our lives? I mean, that's the whole point of Lent, is to that desert feeling to be a joyous Easter people at the end. And we need to let go of things. We need to have that rebirth of philosophies and theologies and letting go. I'm thinking of Frozen right now, let it go. And how much we don't let go for whatever, this resentment or hostility that we just we're like, I'm just going to hold it because it makes me feel bad. But like there needs to be that movement, not a circular movement, but like forward movement. So we don't get wrapped up in this cyclical event of just doing the same thing and expecting different results, which is the definition of insanity. And how many times in our lives do we do the same thing and expect a different result?
I saw a meme about this gospel once that I think about a lot, and it said, Jesus, forgive me for the times when I desired a place at a table that you would have flipped. Right?
Yeah.
Something to think about. When do I want into that system?
Yeah.
That might be damaging to other people, instead of just saying, start over, do over.
Yeah.
And how often too, I think, of the other people walking into that temple who this was just how it was. Like they didn't even see it as egregious or being taken advantage of. It was just how the temple was, and this is what this is how it worked. And it took Jesus being like, oh no, this is not what, because if you go to the first reading, of course it's the 10 Commandments, right? But you have the laws, and then you have how the laws are lived out. And Jesus was like, oh no, this is not how my Father ever intended for you to live out the laws he gave you. This is not right. This is not how it's meant to be. And so, he, in this case, tears down the physical structure by flipping the tables. And then, of course, through his ministry and through his life and through what, ultimately his death and resurrection, he completely turns it on its head.
Jesus turns everything upside down.
Yeah. That's interesting. I didn't think about it until Vicky, you were talking, but like interpretation is like really key here. They interpreted the laws as this was okay. And then it takes Jesus coming in and be like, no, that's not what this interpretation was. And how many times do we, look at us, we're reading the same gospels and the three of us have different interpretations of it. It's just really interesting that what are we focusing on? What is that nugget, I guess, of, I'm going back to my youth group days. What would Jesus do? How are we supposed to live? Do we take the time to evaluate what we do and what we say every moment in a way that's like, is this my interpretation or is this God's will for me to do? So I just threw that out there.
Yeah, and the 10 Commandments, they were meant to help the Israelites live a life of freedom, right? Like the first one, like, I am the Lord your God who brought you out of slavery in Egypt. Like, I brought you out of slavery and he wanted you to be free, but we take the law, we take what God gives us, and then we, build churches and structures and lots more rules and yeah.
Or fit that into our life, like a puzzle piece. Like, okay, I
Yes,
have this piece. It
yes.
doesn't fit, but I'm going to make it fit by cutting it
Mhm.
and taking pieces of it away so it fits to what I believe instead of what the bigger picture is.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, that's good. Um, I want to talk about the second reading too. Do you guys think are we done with the first and the gospel, or do you got more to say? No. Okay. Um, this one is a shorter one, so I'm just going to read part of it. Jews demand signs and Greeks look for wisdom, but we proclaim Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles. So I just think that sentence is so interesting and there's so much in there because what we believe is a stumbling block to a lot of people, or foolishness to a lot of people.
Mhm.
But we believe it. Like
Yeah.
this central doctrine that like Christ is on the cross and through the cross comes new life. It didn't make sense to to all kinds of people when Jesus lived. And I think even now it's a challenge. So what do you got, guys? What do you think about that?
I think the idea of what we believe and what we know is true is so hard for people sometimes to grasp or to fathom. And I like the idea, like it is filled with signs and it's filled with wisdom, but it's hard to understand because of that. And so it just seemed, back then it seemed silly. And people to this day, right, sometimes think it's silly. Like you believe this guy died and rose from the dead 3 days later, and like what, how, why, what? Because it's not tangible, right? It's not something we can feel and touch and see. Yeah, it's so true. And there's so much witness and richness though to that. And the end of it, right? The foolishness of God is wiser than human wisdom. That the thing you think is so foolish for God to do is truly the most wise thing for us all.
It's all going to be foolish to the other person, right? I mean, we're not going to be able to understand that, but it's not for us to understand. It's us to be a witness of and to share in that, but be able to understand others.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important. But the idea that, I've had friends who aren't Catholic and they're like, why are you so Catholic? Like with everything going on, and why do you really believe that you're eating the body of Christ, and how do you but I'm able to share with them that my feelings and my belief is what is right for me. And they accept that for me, and they're not pushing me away from it. They're not trying to convert me or anything like that. But the understanding of like, no matter how foolish we think something is, or no matter how much wisdom we think we have, God is much more wiser and is doing things that are supposed to be done. I don't know if that makes any sense, what I was just talking about, but like, I don't know. I struggle with that because I have friends of different faiths, and I've never once felt like I needed to convert them or they needed to convert me. I have a neighbor who is Mormon, and he came to our Easter vigil last year because he's like, we don't celebrate it like what you guys do, and I want to experience that. And he was so open and willingness to come that I don't know. I don't know. I just
I hear you. I hear you,
What
sister.
I said doesn't make any sense now that I said it.
It did. I'm also thinking about like the idea of a suffering God being at the central, being at the heart, right? That God suffers with
Yeah.
us. Is hard to it's hard to explain, but if you've experienced a suffering God draw close to you in your suffering, even if you can't find words for that experience, then you get it. Like kind of the difference between faith and belief, right? Like you can believe things in at a head level, but at a heart level, this idea that, God was born, God lived, God died, and then God rose again is something you can really only get in your heart. You're not going to be able to explain this, even though we have all made careers out of trying to explain this to young people. But like, you do all the explanation, but you know that that's not sufficient.
Right.
Because you need
And
that.
you can't impart it. Only God can impart it to someone's heart, I guess.
Yeah, well, you were saying that one of the things I thought about is, we all have people in our lives who are not Catholic or fallen away Catholic. I have many friends and family members who were raised and no longer practice. And I remember I was in conversation with someone really close to me, and she was just like, how do you have faith after all the tragedy you went through in your life? Like, how can you believe in a God? And I said, because God was with me in all of that, because he knew what I felt, and because he has suffered, and I can look at the cross and know that he gets my pain and my suffering. And that's such a hard selling point for our faith, right? To be like, yeah, like he suffers with you, but that is what draws you closer, and that is what makes that relationship stronger, right? Because it's all about that relationship that we have with our community, but also individually. And that is hard to explain in words many times. It's something that needs to be experienced. And like that welcoming in, I think, is so key, because you just have to kind of experience it to understand it.
I was just thinking about one of the classes that I took, Images of Christ. And it's just like, this is one image, like the suffering Jesus, then you have the joyous Jesus, then you have, all these different images of Christ. And everybody is going to assimilate to one of them at one time or another. Maybe different images of Jesus per day. I mean, we all know our highs and lows every day. But with this, it's like what you guys are just talking about with young kids and everything. I'm just thinking of our two RCIC candidates who are catechumens, actually. Like, they are 12 and 13, and they asked to become Catholic themselves, and they are going to be baptized at the Easter Vigil. And both of them have asked me multiple times, why can't I just get baptized today? Like, why can't we just do it at Mass? Like, they are so on fire and ready to go. And I had the blessing of being with the RCIA candidates, with Deacon Eric, and they were just like, we are on fire. And there's something about being cradle Catholic to something like working with kids and adults who are in the RCIA program, because their whole like mindset is just like eagerness and on fire, and like nothing's going to stop them. And it's such a blessing to see. And even in these suffering images of Jesus and Jesus crucified and what Jesus did for us, they get it. And they want it. And it's it's so empowering.
Father's house, right? Zeal for my Father's house will consume me. You're seeing it happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like the confirmation kids, even they've been baptized, they've made their first communion, but like many of them, I mean, we always talk about, oh, the teens are just there because mom and dad or grandma and grandpa told them they have to be. But I am a witness to the confirmation class, and we have an amazing church with these kids. And I think it's something that we need to acknowledge, and we need to express that, you know, they're struggling too, and they have questions, and we might not know the answers, but they are asking them, and they are like ready.
Right. So our job, is to make sure that we're trying to clear all the stumbling blocks and the money changers temples, and like just like whatever is separating people from being able to access the divine, right? Because
I mean,
right, the Ten Commandments weren't there to give like less freedom, they were there to give more freedom. So church should be here to give you more freedom to fully live as the person God wants you to be, and to grow in faith, to grow closer to God.
Yeah. I mean, we still have stumbling blocks as we teach this.
We all will.
Or maybe I'm speaking for myself. I don't know.
That's why we're not your typical church ladies.
Exactly.
Okay, you guys, that was a lot. Anybody have any further thoughts on any of our Lent week 3 readings?
I just want to reiterate, like, we're here with you guys, and I'm so blessed that we have this opportunity to talk with you and just to share with what our thoughts are, and I love having conversations with Ann and Vicky, and it just makes my day that we can do this, and that, even though weeks 1, 2, and 3 were kind of like, we're almost there. We are almost
halfway, guys.
We're halfway there, and I can't wait to hear from you guys and ladies, whoever's watching. Just know that you are with us, and if you have any thoughts, come up to us and chat. We love that.
We'll be praying for you this week. All right, everybody, have a good one. We'll catch you next time.
See ya.
On behalf of Anne, Karen, and myself, thank you again for listening to this episode of Faith Conversations for Your Real Life. Please make sure to subscribe to wherever you're listening or watching this episode. You can find the readings linked in the description box below, and we can't wait to see you again next time on Faith Conversations for Your Real Life with your favorite not so typical church ladies.